for their contribution in terms of broadening what we hope was a general interest.
Queen Camilla had prepared herself for resistance, embarrassment, even another cold rejection from the Prince of Wales. She had not prepared for Princess Anne to enter the room carrying William's final succession order, or for the devastating sentence that followed. Within moments, Camilla's expression changed. Her hand reached desperately for the back of a chair, and the woman who had fought for decades to secure her royal position collapsed before Anne could finish explaining what William had done. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla waited at Clarence's house, certain the meeting concerned arrangements around Charles. She believed Anne had come to discuss what would happen if the king became unable to serve. A regency, the legal arrangement allowing another royal to carry out sovereign responsibilities when the monarch cannot, would require negotiation. The queen expected her marriage and title to guarantee her a voice. Anne entered without aids. She carried a sealed order and closed the door. William, she said, had signed a final succession directive, a binding instruction governing how authority would pass into the next reign. Camilla and her private family were permanently excluded from succession briefings, regency planning, the heirs' transition council, and decisions concerning the transfer of royal power after Charles. The prince had appointed Anne sole royal custodian, charged with enforcing it. Camilla stared at her. "Say that again." Anne repeated every word, slower this time. The monarch asked whether Charles could reopen the matter privately, but the princess answered without hesitation. No, the directive was final. It could not be softened through a husband's intervention or undone through a family bargain. Anne placed the document on a small table rather than offering it to her. That movement stripped away the last illusion of negotiation. Camilla was not being asked to agree. She was being told where her authority ended. Camilla's voice dropped. Had Catherine supported this? Anne did not answer at once. She revealed only that the future king had reviewed a private file containing dates, recorded conversations, and documented attempts to enter restricted succession discussions. The decision had grown from evidence, not anger. Camilla reached for the chair, missed its edge, and crumpled. Anne called for help, yet kept one hand over the sealed order. Before the door opened, she delivered one final warning. This had not begun with a single disagreement. It had been building for months. Camilla's collapse was the first visible consequence, but the real damage had begun long before Anne crossed that room, and each person at the center of the crisis had something deeply personal to lose. The succession order appeared to be about authority, documents, and constitutional preparation. In truth, it cut directly into four private fears. Camilla feared becoming irrelevant the moment Charles could no longer protect her. William feared inheriting a monarchy already compromised by private influence. Anne feared watching duty bend beneath family pressure. And Charles feared the final humiliation of discovering that his wife and his eldest son could no longer remain in the same royal future without one of them being pushed aside. William did not act like an angry son. He acted like an heir staring into a dangerous transition. The heir is the person next in line to inherit the crown, and for him that responsibility reached beyond ceremony. Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis were the future he was protecting. Any uncertainty around them created space for private pressure, and he had decided that space must close. Camilla felt the order differently. She had spent years earning acceptance, surviving hostility, and building a place beside Charles. Succession planning proved her importance might outlast his protection. To lose access now felt less like administration and more like erasure. The queen could keep her title, yet still watch her influence disappear. Charles sat alone with the first page before him. He removed his glasses and placed them beside the document without speaking. The king wanted to defend his wife, but he also understood William's right to secure the next reign. That silence exposed his deepest fear. Protecting Camilla might weaken his son, while supporting the prince might break the woman beside him. Anne carried her own burden. She had paused outside the room before delivering the order, steadying herself because she knew what her entrance meant. The princess agreed with the boundary, yet she also knew Camilla would remember her as the face of humiliation. Still, duty won. Catherine remained deliberately restrained. She had not signed the directive, but William had discussed every consequence with her in a private recorded conversation. Her fear was not about Camilla's title. It was about George's future being shaped by loyalties that did not belong inside his constitutional path. William chose Anne because no courtier, solicitor, or private secretary could carry the same weight. Charles could not pressure her. Camilla could not bend her, and no one could dismiss her as Catherine's messenger. Anne later told Charles the order was not punishment. It was protection against a pattern that had begun months earlier, during a ceremony he had dismissed as a misunderstanding. To understand why William made such an unforgiving decision, the story must return to the day a seemingly minor ceremonial dispute became the point of no return. The crisis did not begin with Camilla's collapse. It began months earlier at a private succession rehearsal inside Buckingham Palace, during a ceremony so restricted that even senior household members were removed from the room. William had entered, expecting a technical discussion about continuity. Instead, he watched Camilla move a chair, challenge an instruction, and make one quiet request concerning Prince George. It lasted less than 5 minutes, yet everyone present would later remember it as the moment William stopped treating the tension as accidental. William arrived believing the meeting would settle practical questions, not expose a hidden struggle. The succession rehearsal was a private planning session designed to decide who would receive sealed briefings, where senior royals would sit, and who would be present during the first hours after authority passed from one monarch to the next. Charles, Anne, Camilla, and 2 constitutional advisors joined him. Every detail mattered, because confusion during a transfer of power could quickly become a battle for influence. Camilla already felt excluded. Important plans moved directly from Charles to William, while her household received little information. The Queen believed she was being treated as a ceremonial figure rather than a woman whose place beside the king had taken years to secure. That frustration had been growing quietly, and now it entered the room with her. Camilla moved the folder assigned to Anne and took the chair beside Charles. Then she asked that her private secretary receive copies of every transition document involving William and George. No plans concerning the young prince, she insisted, should be completed without her household being informed. William did not raise his voice. His restraint made the question more dangerous. Why, he asked, did Camilla's private office need access to decisions concerning his son's constitutional future? She answered that continuity required family unity, but the phrase no longer sounded reassuring. It sounded like a claim. Charles stepped in, calling the request practical. The king tried to soften the moment, yet William looked directly at him and asked whether they had discussed it beforehand. Charles hesitated. That pause told the prince more than any confession could have done. Anne saw Camilla place her hand over George's briefing folder. The princess calmly removed it and returned the file to William. No one shouted. No one needed to. The struggle over control had become unmistakable. William recorded Camilla's exact words that evening and began documenting every attempt by her household to enter succession planning. Months later, Anne would carry that file into Clarence's house. What Camilla considered a request for inclusion, William regarded as an attempt to cross a line around his son, and when they finally faced one another, neither was willing to retreat. There were no advisors in the room when William finally confronted Camilla. No palace official could soften his language, and no carefully written statement could disguise what had happened between them. She expected the prince to accuse her of ambition. Instead, he spoke about George. He spoke about trust. Then he asked one question that left her visibly shaken. Why had her private office attempted to obtain a document that belonged only to the direct line of succession? William had demanded the meeting after discovering that Camilla's senior aide requested a summary of the restricted rehearsal notes. Those notes recorded private arrangements for the direct line of succession the family members legally closest to inheriting the crown, and access to them could shape appointments, influence, and control during the next reign. He refused to let 2 royal households fight through letters. He wanted the truth from her directly. Camilla remained seated. She believed Charles had already described the request as administrative, and she carried herself like a queen, addressing an heir whose judgment had been clouded by old resentment. William placed the copied request before her and asked whether she had authorized it. Camilla did not answer plainly. She said protecting Charles required her to understand what would happen around him during a future transfer of power. The monarch could not be left surrounded by arrangements his wife had never seen. Her explanation sounded controlled, but William heard the claim beneath it. William told her that protecting Charles did not grant access to George. The prince warned that his children would never become leverage in another person's search for security or influence. Camilla's face tightened. She accused him of turning an ordinary request into an attack on his family. Camilla rose and reminded him that she had spent years defending the monarchy, while others criticized it, abandoned it, or profited from its pain. The Queen said her service had earned trust. William stood as well, closed the document, and slid it back toward her. Service, he replied, could not become a permanent claim over the next reign. William then disclosed what his private record contained. Camilla's household had sought information on future appointments, access during the transition, and Catherine's place on the First Succession Council, a temporary group responsible for guiding the earliest decisions of a new sovereign. 3 requests, 3 boundaries tested. Camilla insisted there had been no hostile intention, but she never denied knowing about them. William ended the meeting with a final warning. Anne would review the evidence. Catherine would receive the full account. Then one irreversible decision would follow. Once William placed the evidence in Anne's hands, the struggle was no longer about who felt offended. It became a question of who possessed the authority to define the next reign. William may have written the order, but Princess Anne gave it power. She understood the palace's oldest weakness. Family decisions could be delayed, softened, or quietly undone when affection collided with duty. So she demanded something stronger than a private promise. She wanted dates, signatures, custodial authority, and a record that could not disappear into a locked drawer. When William handed her the final pages, Anne did not congratulate him. She simply asked whether he was prepared to live with the pain they would cause. Anne's influence did not come from standing next in line to the throne. It came from decades of service, difficult choices, and a reputation for recognizing when a family quarrel had become an institutional threat. Charles trusted her honesty even when it wounded him. William trusted her because she could separate private anger from genuine danger. William appointed her custodian of the directive, the person formally responsible for protecting, interpreting, and enforcing the order. Her presence mattered because the period between one reign and the next could become dangerously uncertain. Without a neutral guardian, Charles's household and the prince's advisors might each try to soften the language in their own favor. Anne sat alone with William at Windsor and read every page without speaking. When she reached the clause excluding Camilla's relatives from transition meetings, the princess finally looked up. Did he understand, she asked, that the Queen would experience this as a judgment upon her entire life, even if no member of the public ever read it? William admitted that humiliation was not his purpose. The prince did not want Camilla stripped of dignity, but he refused to let compassion create uncertainty around Catherine or George. His voice faltered when he said his first duty belonged to the family that would inherit the consequences long after the present conflict had ended. Anne understood the cost. Charles might see her signature as betrayal. The king might believe his sister had chosen his son over his wife. Yet loyalty to a brother, she said, did not require surrendering judgment. She signed the custodial page and set down the pen. William then showed her the clause hidden near the end. Neither Charles nor Camilla could reverse the directive through private letters or informal instructions. Any amendment required the prince's signature, Catherine's written acknowledgement, and Anne's presence as witness. Anne reached the final page and found a handwritten note. Camilla must be told personally, without courtiers, because no one else could carry the truth without weakening it. The note also warned that any challenge would trigger immediate enforcement. Anne's signature transformed William's boundary into an unbreakable command, and when Camilla awoke after collapsing, the first consequence was already waiting outside her door. Camilla regained consciousness expecting reassurance. Instead, she opened her eyes to a palace that had already begun obeying William. A red succession folder had vanished from her desk. 2 scheduled briefings were removed from her diary. Her private secretary was informed that future requests concerning George would be rejected without explanation. Nothing dramatic was announced, yet every quiet alteration carried the same devastating message. The order Anne delivered was not symbolic. Camilla's access was being withdrawn while she was still recovering from hearing it. Camilla still held her title, residences, public duties, and ceremonial precedence, the formal order deciding where senior royals stand and appear at official events. None of that had changed. The punishment she feared was subtler. Every route connecting her household to the future reign had been closed, leaving her secure beside Charles in the present, but powerless over what followed him. Anne supervised the first changes personally. The princess instructed officials that the directive must never be described as revenge. It concerned succession authority alone. Camilla remained queen, but her office could no longer request documents, attend transition meetings, or influence decisions involving William, Catherine, or George. Camilla pushed herself upright and asked for the red folder she had reviewed the night before. Her private secretary hesitated, then explained that it had been collected under Anne's written authority. The Queen stared at the empty place on her desk. She asked the same question twice, as though repetition might produce another answer. Then she ordered everyone out. Camilla removed a bracelet and placed it beside the untouched tea. The small movement broke her control. She began to cry, not only because William had humiliated her, but because his order revealed a future she had always feared. Her influence would end with Charles. Everything she had built could remain respected and still become irrelevant. Charles arrived carrying anger he could barely contain. The king promised to speak to his son and demanded to know why the changes had started so quickly. Camilla asked one question: could he overturn them? He did not answer at once. That silence wounded her more deeply than the directive. Charles later read the non-reversal clause and understood that William had anticipated his intervention. The monarch's signature was not required because he had already allowed his heir authority over transition planning. His own earlier decision had now limited his power to protect his wife. Camilla told Charles she would not accept being treated as a threat. Before he could reply, Anne requested a private meeting. The princess said the rupture could still be contained, but only if one person finally admitted what had truly driven the fight. The fallout had stripped away Camilla's access, but it was a conversation without documents, advisors, or royal rank that finally changed the direction of the conflict. For the first time since the crisis began, Camilla entered a room without trying to defend her position. Anne was waiting alone. There was no sealed order between them, no constitutional advisor, and no opportunity to hide behind Charles. What followed was not an apology at first. It was a confession. Camilla admitted that her attempts to enter succession planning had not begun as a plan to control William. They had begun with a fear she had never been willing to say aloud: that the crown would forget her the moment Charles was gone. Anne had invited her to Windsor for one purpose. The directive would not be withdrawn, but the bitterness surrounding it could still be contained before it destroyed the family around Charles. A constitutional advisor is a specialist who guides the monarchy through legal questions of power and succession, yet none had been invited. The princess wanted truth, not another formal defense. Camilla arrived expecting a reprimand. Instead, she noticed Anne had removed the document from the table before the meeting began. The gesture allowed the Queen to speak without rank standing between them. For once, they were simply two women shaped by the same institution and frightened by what it could take from them. Camilla's hands began to shake. She admitted that she had sought access because she feared isolation after Charles's reign. The Queen imagined invitations disappearing, loyal staff being removed, and every old conflict being placed at her feet. She had tried to secure relevance before William's future court could decide she no longer mattered. Anne listened without interruption. Then the princess answered with painful calm. Fear explained Camilla's choices, but it did not excuse them. Survival inside the monarchy could not depend upon entering William's authority over Catherine and George. One family's security could not be built by reaching into another family's future. Camilla did not argue. She asked whether William believed she had intended to displace Catherine. Anne answered from their recorded private discussion. The prince did not believe that had been her original aim. He believed her need for protection had grown until it became impossible to distinguish from ambition. Anne then disclosed the assurance hidden within the directive. Camilla would keep dignity, protection, and an honored place during Charles's lifetime and afterward. The Queen would not be erased, provided she respected the boundary separating her legacy from the next reign. Camilla agreed to write a formal acknowledgement accepting that limit. Yet before signing, she asked for one final meeting with William, not to reverse his decision, but to ensure her surrender of influence was never mistaken for surrender of dignity. That quiet admission ended the private war. But outside the palace walls, the first details of Camilla's collapse were already escaping into public view. The palace believed the crisis had been contained until one image appeared outside Clarence's house. It showed Princess Anne leaving through the side entrance, William's sealed folder held beneath her arm, while a medical car remained parked behind the gates. Within hours, the picture was everywhere. Broadcasters interrupted regular coverage. Newspaper editors rewrote their front pages. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, not knowing the full decision but sensing that something irreversible had happened between the Queen and the future king. Palace officials released a short statement saying Camilla had experienced a temporary episode of exhaustion and was resting. The carefully limited wording only deepened suspicion. Anne's visit and the medical response had occurred within the same hour, and the public understood that such timing was rarely meaningless. Clarence House, the Queen's London residence with Charles, suddenly became the center of a national argument. The public divided almost immediately. Some believed William had finally defended the direct line the family members closest to inheriting the crown from private influence. Others saw Camilla's exclusion as a brutal punishment against a woman who had spent decades stabilizing her position beside the king. Sympathy and suspicion rose together. The next morning, one London newspaper carried the words, "The line is drawn," above the photograph of Anne holding the sealed folder. At the BBC's palace desk, the lead presenter called it, "the clearest separation yet between the present queen and the future reign." That single sentence transformed a family conflict into a battle over the monarchy's direction. Charles watched the coverage alone after breakfast. The king lowered the volume when the photograph returned to the screen. He ignored the headline and studied his sister's expression instead. Anne had carried William's order, protected Camilla's confession, and absorbed public anger, so neither man would have to explain the full truth. Camilla faced a harsher symbol outside Clarence House. One woman placed flowers near the gate in support. Another held a sign demanding that William's boundary remain untouched. The Queen realized that her private fear of being forgotten had become a public debate about whether she had ever sought too much power. Anne blocked the complete directive from leaking, but she authorized one narrow clarification through a written palace statement. Only William's immediate family would control preparations for the next reign. The princess confirmed his authority without exposing Camilla's private admission or humiliating Charles further. The storm slowly weakened, yet the family remained unfinished. William agreed to one final meeting. Camilla arrived carrying her signed acknowledgement, while Charles insisted on attending. The monarchy could survive a headline, but it could not survive endless private resentment, and the last meeting would determine whether William's decision became a wound or a boundary the family could finally accept. The final meeting did not end with an embrace, a reversal, or a dramatic act of forgiveness. It ended with something rarer inside royal life: clarity. Camilla placed her signed acknowledgement before William. Charles sat beside her, visibly wounded but silent. Anne remained near the door, not as an enforcer now, but as the witness who had carried the family through its most dangerous confrontation. William opened the document, read Camilla's final sentence, and realized the battle was over. Camilla had accepted that succession planning belonged exclusively to William, Catherine, their children, and the constitutional officials chosen by the heir. Those officials were the legal and government advisors responsible for guiding an orderly transfer of royal authority. Her private relatives would receive no access, advisory position, or informal influence when power passed from the present reign to the next. William did not weaken the directive. The prince understood that a temporary compromise would only preserve the same uncertainty that had divided them. The exclusion had to remain permanent, not because he wanted revenge, but because Catherine and George needed protection from future pressure. Camilla placed her pen beside the signed page. She told William that she had never intended to take Catherine's future or George's inheritance from them. The Queen had acted from fear, not hatred. Yet the future king answered that intentions could no longer be the standard. The monarchy needed boundaries strong enough to survive affection, panic, and private ambition. Charles finally broke his silence. The king admitted that his desire to protect Camilla had allowed uncertainty to grow between his reign and William's future. He did not condemn his wife. He did not accuse his son. Instead, the monarch acknowledged that avoiding the conflict had made its final consequences far more painful. Anne stepped forward and closed the folder. The princess handed it to William, formally ending her duty as messenger and custodian of the family's confrontation. Camilla looked toward her and offered a quiet thank you. Anne had delivered a truth so painful that it brought the Queen to the floor, but she had also delivered it without cruelty. Camilla kept her dignity and her place beside Charles. She surrendered every attempt to influence what followed him. William secured the independence of his future reign. Catherine's position remained protected, and George's path was placed beyond private bargaining. No one had won. Yet the monarchy had chosen boundaries over revenge. Camilla's collapse exposed the danger of turning fear into influence, while her acceptance restored the dignity she feared losing. William's decision wounded the family, but it ended the uncertainty. And when the doors closed after that last meeting, the succession was no longer a battlefield, it was settled, protected, and finally beyond dispute. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.